But the most complicated technology we deal with on any single daily basis is the human brain. And it's a mobile mindset. There's a reason people say the mobile mindset is a totally different, as I said earlier, totally different experience than being on a desktop. So we have to figure out how we satisfy this technology for us to be successful.
Yeah, we have a full-time staffer who does sales and events. We're going to add another one soon, and their job is to sell the sponsorships. And the key is you have to not, in an organization with 6 people, there are no boundaries. Everybody does whatever they have to do. So when we had our event last week, the year sort of anniversary Who's Next event, I mean, our reporters were at the front desk checking people in. You know, there's no like, I'm a reporter, I don't do that. Everybody does what they have to do. I've sat at events we've done before doing make your own emoji, because we had too many people, more people show up than we thought, and we needed another person to help kind of, that's a long story about what we were doing, but like I run the company and I'm in there like helping figure stuff out. So I think the key is, you know, everybody is sort of an events person when they need to be, but we have one person who coordinates it, but everything can't fall on that one person. And so I think, so we may at some point, if we scale it up a little bit more, maybe want to tap into some events companies in town for like some pieces of it, but I think the heart and soul of what we're trying to produce we'll always do ourselves.
The device that's sitting in their pocket is in many cases, if not their only connection to the online world, is certainly the primary connection that they use when they're on the go, but also in their home. And when you dig into the demographics on this, what you find is that this is particularly prominent among certain groups. So young people sort of do this at high rates, but in particular, if you look at people with relatively low household incomes, if you look at communities of color, people with relatively low sort of socioeconomic status in general, you see those groups in those communities at high rates telling us that you know, they rely heavily on their smartphones for online access. And as we've sort of dug into this issue more and more, what we're really seeing is that it's a sort of a consumer choice issue, but it's also very much a financial issue, where someone who maybe can't afford a computer and an ongoing cost of a broadband connection plus the smartphone that they need to be able to keep track of their kids and keep in touch with the people they care about, is really having to prioritize which of those access options they use. And in many cases, particularly within some of those more economically disadvantaged communities, we're seeing them increasingly reach for that smartphone as opposed to the broadband connection.
We call it web esteem. It's a common term. You've heard it probably. The idea is that where we get our significance and value now is no longer from how many friends come talk to me at my locker or come to my soccer game or something like that. Now it's about how many friends do I have online, how many people are engaging with me.
These are enablers, because at the end of the day, you have to understand that every brand wants to know you individually. They want to know what you like and don't like, and they want to give you what you're asking for in real time. Every company in every one of these boxes were funded with tens of millions of dollars by Silicon Valley to just do analytics or alerts, content management, location-based services. Because what is everybody taught to believe? Do one thing, do it better than everyone else in the world, and you're going to dominate that field. Except mobile doesn't work that way. Multi-screen doesn't work that way. What people actually need are everything that was built from day one that was meant for mobile, that was all fully integrated, and it all plays nicely together. What we found from doing about 500 application portfolios for the biggest brands in the world at scale, and when I say scale, I mean we're doing over 1 trillion transactions a year in support of these staggering live events. And when you see that, you realize that the application experience is only as good as the weakest link within it. Who am I trying to reach? What kind of delightful experience am I trying to provide? Once you do that, then you have to have someone build it. But most importantly, once you build anything, you have to facilitate discovery. And when there's more than 1 million applications on the iOS store, hundreds of thousands on Android, or even what they're putting up, tens of thousands with Microsoft, someone out there has to find you. So a lot of the work we'll do at times are application installs. So you might say, wow, you're working with Coles over here, and you're working with King on Candy Crush Saga. What does that have to do with each other? What it has to do with is the same demographic. So the average Coles user, who's a power user, is 65 years old, white, retired, in the United States. Ironically, that's the exact demographic of Candy Crush Saga. Same one. Just like NASCAR and WWE, pretty much the same audience. that most of our customers that use this don't want anyone in the world to know this even exists. They don't want you to know their customers or anything else. But what you do is this. We'll use Kohl's. I'm Kohl's. And you walk into TJ Maxx or Target or Walmart. So what we do is you put a geo-fence around every single Kohl's store in the United States. Then you put geo-fences around every one of your competitors' stores simultaneously. Because once you have your device and you have a Kohl's application on it, and where's it at? It's in your pocket because it never leaves you. You start walking around while your location is on. You have the application on. So as you walk into TJ Maxx, Kohl's goes, uh-oh, they're going to a competitive store. So what we do is we enable an instant message that incents you right now to stop in your tracks, walk out of TJ Maxx, get in your car, drive to Kohl's, go inside, take the offer, and have full attribution at retail point of sale. And so these conversion, 18 to 40%, that is people being sent notices going into a competitor's store, stopping in their tracks, getting in their car, driving to the other store, going in and buying the offer because they only had a 60 to 90 minute window to go get that offer before it expired. So think about that. Over 90% open rate and 20 to 40% conversion at retail. That's frightening. Now imagine you don't have this. The other thing you also see is you can collect an amazing amount of competitive intelligence, and your users become the ones collecting it for you in real time on every store they go. Where do I go? How many times do I go to Target versus Walmart versus GameStop? How much time do I spend when I'm in there? And they can feed all these and say, how do our stores perform versus theirs? And this is what the next generation of one-to-one targeting for either marketing and advertising looks like. It's the same methodology of how you use geo-fences indoors and outdoors, and it allows you to accomplish things in ways that have really never been possible before. Usually the first interaction is if the group already has their own applications or building them. We have tool sets that come in the form of software development kits or application programming interfaces or portals that can be embedded in what they've already built that light up this new functionality that they haven't had. So you basically license a right to use that capability set, and then they can incorporate it in what they've already built. In other cases, if they don't have any applications, usually what we do is we see, based on the budget, whether they're trying to build something very high-end and unique to themselves or a chain of 12 of their stores or something, or whether they want to license a right to use so that it's their brand and content, but we handle everything else so that they don't have to figure out how this works. And those usually for smaller stores, we usually would do more of those kind of deployments.
Because what kind of budget are you talking?
They're all over the map. They're from something that could cost a few $1,000s a month up to, you see people that, when you get super high end, you see people spending up to $100,000 a month. It depends on usually the number of active users that it's supporting, and the smaller companies are usually supporting a smaller number of active users. The biggest thing that we've seen that's successful is to take very large audiences of users and allowing the segments and the subsegments of those users. So if I shifted to Cabela's, the hunters versus the fishers versus the campers are all different subsegments. So I think you can control, you obviously don't, if you're just doing one to everyone, which is a lot of what those email things were, just one to everybody getting blasted, that saturation probably happens a lot faster. In this, if you're actually focusing in on the slices of what people's interests actually are, and you allow them to set the frequency, we never have that problem when the users are in charge of setting the frequency. So we saw passion verticals adopt first. Media, entertainment, sports, internet. Retail and even things tied to news have been laggards in the adoption pattern. But what we've seen is, so if you've downloaded a Kohl's or a Cabela's or a GameStop application, it has to be on your phone, and then you actually are in charge. So you may have just not realized if you have a Kohl's app that you haven't turned on, that you've opted in. There's so much information on us in public records and our credit profiles. I don't have a magic answer for how to, everyone's fighting of who's smarter than who on hacking.
Turning off the location services help?
Yeah, it definitely, the more things that you turn off, the more safe it is. It's like if you go into your browsers, just going back to the desktop, you can go either incognito, like in Chrome, So every bit of your history is private, or you can use Chrome. And those are two very different experiences in terms of the data sets that you're sharing. So a lot of it is just learning the software you're using and checking the settings as to what you do. But I think I'm scared for all of us, actually, as it relates to our personal information, because like healthcare, right? The idea that all of our healthcare is protected, no, it's not. It's just in different forms of compromise, unfortunately.
In an increasingly global world where, like the EU is tracking, a different path with the right to be forgotten, does the U.S. risk being sort of an outlier, and how does that affect kind of the global businesses that are doing this kind of work?
Well, so because we've always worked with like the Fortune 5000, we always said we're in the one strike, you're out business. So you don't get to screw up like the McDonald's brand ever once. You do it once, it's over. Same for most big brands. So I think the first and foremost thing is you have to empower users to be in charge, so that you're taking the responsibility away from the technologists and even from the brand, because you're empowering the end user to be in charge. EU is very much taking a union-wide stance to say, anyone who wants to do this, you have to comply. So all technology companies will comply with government edicts, for sure. But it doesn't mean there's not going to be messy battles that go on with it. I think if you empower people around the world to do it, and there's also differences by age. The younger you get, the more people want to volunteer, and they're very comfortable with it. Many of us who are older probably are the opposite. So somewhere in the middle, there's going to be a balance, and I think it's going to be even city by city, state by state, country by country. It's completely different, even if you don't get into like all of the EU. So I think that it'll be, people figure out workarounds to everything. Even the ad blocking technology, right? There's still ways to track people. It's just you have to get more creative. It's late. So I'll say the dirty secret, because I'm doing a for-profit business, right? So we actually discriminate against the vertical solutions we provide. We started with 4. One is called the MDU, or the multiple dwelling unit space. So people buying luxury condominiums at Trump International, Tower, Mandarin Oriental, and those kind of things, because you have people with discretionary income buying a condominium, downloading an application to manage the experience, the workflow, concierge services, and all that. Malls, airports, hospitals, hugely big businesses that have real budget, because a lot of the real estate investment trusts are exceptionally good at building these amazing developments. They're not very good at, how do I engage the users on these facilities? We have a generic version we can use elsewhere, and the two hardest for us so far have been education and museums. There's an overwhelming need. It's not a need issue, it's a budget issue.
Art is what you can do with knowledge of geo in spaces that you don't own.
Yeah, the interesting part is geoconquesting is a great example where you're allowing the people that do like your brand, who go to other places, to collect data for you, just in a natural setting. It's not forced like a focus group. You're just walking around and it happens to be with you. So it works really well. I think how granular you can get, it's easy to do GPS geo-fences for competitive things. A little bit harder to start using Wi-Fi or beacons, because that would imply some level of consent. But what users do is always what users do, right? It's just like going to a concert and they say no flash photography, no videotaping, but you see all this stuff come from concerts anyway, because people pull out their phones, start recording, and they're streaming. So I think that where the opportunity probably exists that a lot of folks aren't quite realizing is, even think of all the investment here, let's use right where we're at right now. I don't know what the IT budget was for the University of Nebraska, but I got to think they've spent a lot of money to put Wi-Fi and all sorts of capability throughout the whole campus. But how many people can leverage that, or get most of what we're describing is probably non-existent. So what we found is that as soon as we've now created technology that allows the first time you download the application, you obviously have a network connection. So the second that happens, we would download what we would call multi-layer vector mapping, all of the turn-by-turn directions and everything for whatever was tied to that application, either a facility or a number of facilities, and then they were native to the phone. So you could put it in airplane mode, you didn't have to have any network whatsoever, and it would still give you exact pinpointed turn-by-turn directions And then it could get even more accurate and granular if the network suddenly existed, or if there was a beacon, but it made no dependency on it. So that was a pretty ugly, you have to get into these crazy amounts of software to smooth things out and figure out, oh, this is a wall that never moves, this is a wall that's not always static. So it's a hard thing to do. We even came up with versions, like we actually beat Google to win Kaiser. We killed Google. And the reason why is because the Google approach would be to take trucks, and they drive them around, and they sample all the Wi-Fi indoors. The assumption is it's going to stay that way. So if I took an access point, we went to the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas, it would say you're in Lincoln, Nebraska. Well, we know it's not. You just happened to pull one out and you took it with you when you went to the trade show. But that's how Google's technology worked, so that's not a perfect way to do it. What we did is we took our platform, we integrated it with Qualcomm and Samsung chipsets, because they go in all the devices that touch the network. Then we went to Cisco, Ruckus, Motorola Zebra, Aruba, HP, and integrated with all of their Wi-Fi gear, because that composed all the wireless networks indoors in the world. And then we went up to the carriers like AT&T, Verizon, and others to integrate the datacom and telecom. So I use the old BASF analogy where we don't make the chips, we don't make the devices, we don't make the networking gear, we don't make the network, we just make them all better. Because once you're integrated at the infrastructure level, Google would never have a chance driving a little truck around to be accurate every day in real time. If you're a news organization and you want people to download your application, you can actually create these contests and say the only way you can submit is using an authenticated Facebook or Twitter account, and you're going to submit through mobile. So one, they have to download mobile or they can't participate, so your app installs go up. Two, you already have Facebook and Twitter pre-embedded inside of it, and then every single time they're submitting the UGC, we wouldn't have 140 characters of Twitter, we might only have 118, because we would put a bit.ly URL as a front end, and actually you can start trending things on Twitter, because you can actually put the Twitter tags, and then you could also put the URL to download the application, like a little bit.ly.
Right.
And so you don't give them 140 characters, but then you're simultaneously forcing the mobile download. Everything they submit has to go out through their social media that's been authenticated. And then simultaneously it's trending it because you have your tags plus bit.ly, so anyone else that sees it says, oh, I need the app too, they download it, and that facilitates.
Tags and provides it gives you another app download.
It does. And then what we've done where there's contests where you're letting the users vote on the outcome, we'll then let them vote through social media or the internet or a mobile site or the mobile app. So you just have to say, what behaviors do I want to incent? And once you do it, they do the work for you.
Yeah, that's very